Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the iNtErDiSciPliNaRy podcast. I am here today with the lovely Professor Dr. Grace, aka
Hi,
Spicy Peppy Grace on Twitch. And we are going to be talking about academia, both undergrad and grad, and teaching in academia. How are you doing today, Grace?
I am doing well, Lauren. Thank you. It is a little hot here where I live, but I'm not complaining because I have been waiting for summer for such a long time, especially one of the perks of academia that I'm not currently teaching right now. But I'm happy to be here. I am so excited and honored to be on your podcast. You always have cool people on. And so I'm like, am I a cool person?
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren. I also go by Lore. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently an undergrad in college thinking about majoring in linguistics, French, and maybe classics.
My name is Grace. My pronouns are she, her. I am now a tenured professor at a small liberal arts college in the East Coast. So I teach some language courses, your gen eds like Spanish 101, Spanish 102, but I specialize specifically in Latin American literature. My field of specialty is Latin American science fiction, but I teach a range because it's a small institution. I've been in academia for a long time. I started teaching in 2008. I was 21 years old at the time and just fresh into grad school. I got a full ride to grad school, but I had to teach 2 courses per semester in addition to taking all my grad classes. So, I wasn't human for a few years there. I was more machine than human, but I love it. I love teaching at the college level. I love working with students. I didn't always know that this was my passion, but I feel really strongly about it. And it's a job that makes me happy for the most part. And I hope that I can answer all your burning questions and that we can have a really fun, productive conversation today.
What got you into your present career path, and also your choice not only to go into academia professionally, but also to attend college in the United States?
I didn't always know that I wanted to go into academia, but I'm a really highly creative person. I'm not claiming to be amazing at it, but I enjoy a lot of creative pursuits. I majored in music in undergrad, but I never quite felt like I fit in where I was growing up in Colombia. I grew up there until I was 16. Colombian society puts a really big emphasis on physical attractiveness, and for women especially, there's a lot of sexism attached to that. So there were a lot of expectations. It's very heteronormative. But I was uncomfortable and I thought I want to go somewhere where nobody's going to nag me about the way I look, and I just want to do things that I'm passionate about. I mean, I grew up with an idea of the United States that was very much colored by popular media. So the point that I was growing up, the internet was starting, but we were already pretty globalized in terms of television. So I grew up with sitcoms like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Full House. And so I grew up seeing those families that always had their shit together, where the kids went to school and they didn't seem to be, overwhelmed with bullying or with, academic expectations. And there was a lot in terms of like self-expression that I thought it's so much freer there. And I think I want to try doing that instead of like what I'm expected to do here. I first went to a Catholic high school in Kentucky. There I lived with a host family for a year. It was a really tough year for me. I was 16. I was moving to another country where they spoke a different language for the first time without my family, without my friends. It was nothing like the sitcoms I grew up with, let me tell you. Like, people were very xenophobic. That year, I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life other than I want to do music in some capacity. I didn't know any instruments. So I applied to a lot of schools. It was really challenging for me because I had the grades, but I didn't have the citizenship. I went to a school in Kentucky that gave my parents in-state tuition, but they still had to pay full. Social class makes a difference. And for me, that was one thing that just facilitated me pursuing my passions and the things that I was interested in. Undergrad was a journey of trying out things. Like, I started with music and I finished that degree, but along the way, I got to have the experience of being in Spanish literature and Spanish film classes taught in the US for American students as a Colombian student, and realized that, oh, this is not like easy cakes as I thought it was going to be. Like, that's what piqued my interest in that field. I was like, there's so much more here, like all the critical thinking that goes into literary analysis and film analysis. This is kind of fun. And I didn't realize that this was a thing. That was like my first foray into what academia could be like.
I was gonna ask, like, how do you think what you studied as an undergrad impacts your career? But it looks like You've already basically answered that.
There was a lot of meandering. So I had all manner of professors. A lot of them were really funny in the classroom, and that they weren't like scary, and they were really approachable and chill. I thought, oh, this is kind of fun. Like I thought you had to be all serious and like all business, all work all the time. And here I am having a conversation about Pop Tarts with my music theory professor. It felt like he really thought about the students, and that he wasn't talking at you, he was talking with you, having a conversation and asking for your input and just like raising questions and bringing up issues that felt very relevant, very timely, versus, this is like ancient history from a book and we just have to follow the book. Even people in your grade will have a different schedule from you. That blew my mind. Especially in Colombia, it felt very monolithic. Having those classes with those professors that didn't treat it that way and that made learning really interesting and really exciting, that to me felt really fun and like really stayed with me. After I finished my last semester in undergrad, I taught high school for one semester, and it was,
An experience.
yes, it was both excruciating and frustrating and awful, but it was also through that trial by fire, I learned that I did like teaching. I feel really alone here. Students don't like me. Other faculty, because I didn't have like a badge for a couple of weeks, they thought I was a student because I was still young, and they would yell at me and like get mad at me. And I was just like, this is a lot. The internet was really slow, so I would start loading like an online episode of Sailor Moon like in the morning, and by lunchtime it was loaded. So she and another girl started coming in, and we'd all watch Sailor Moon together. And it was just like the sweetest thing. And just to have somebody that said, hey, let's spend this time together, was like the greatest ever. And I thought, oh, there's like opportunities for kindness and teaching, and students aren't evil. Working with the students that actually want to be here and that trust you and open up to you. But I think that was like the it moment, that, oh my gosh, I want to do this and I'm so passionate about it.
I think it's so interesting that you talked about kindness in teaching in high school, because oftentimes as a high school student, you're placed in a position where you are on the lower side of a power dynamic with the adults at the school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what really pisses me off is when
Yeah.
you're in high
Yes.
school and you have to
Mhm.
ask to go to the bathroom.
Oh my gosh. That drove me so batty.
Not that I'm comparing myself to like a zoo animal, but like teenagers will try to fill the space that is given to them. So, the bigger the cage, the nicer the animal, you know?
Yeah, Lauren, like this is one of the reasons why I say you're brilliant. Like I really mean it, because it has taken me 34 years to realize that my upbringing really messed up my issues with trust, and especially feeling like people don't trust me. Even like with groups that are like, maybe they have some behavior management issues, trust is still important in establishing that.
When the modern day American education system is built to train children to work in factories, there's something inherently flawed about that
Oh, yeah.
system.
I was going to say, I feel like all of this is just part of the way people are molded into being productive for a capitalist society.
Indeed.
In like the past decade, just the way that every institution that we're part of is in some way or another very much like, yeah, influenced by capitalism's aims. Lately, I feel so much anger.
Yeah, it's difficult to balance. When you're in high school, people tell you that you're in high school because you need to go to college. And then when you're in college, people tell you that you're in college because you need to get a job. And then when you get a job, people are like, well, now you need to like make as much money as possible and you need to be successful. For my high school, there are very few people who choose not to go to college. And
Yeah.
more and more you see people kind of being funneled into one specific path, when
Yeah.
even with all the people that we've met on the internet, we can see that that's not the
Yeah.
case and that doesn't work for everyone. There needs to be more awareness about the fact that you don't necessarily have to go down one path to like be fulfilled.
You hear so many people trying to, maybe in a well-meaning way, give you advice as you're finishing high school, and a lot of people default to four-year college. It is their journey and their truth that they need to discover themselves. Like, what is it that you actually want to do? Breaking away from parental expectations or like former high school teachers' expectations or even like peer expectations is so hard. There's a lot of value in a traditional college degree, but there's a lot of like positions, jobs out there for which experience is so much more important than like academic credentials. Grades mean different things. Grades can mean how's my progress? Am I eligible for a grad program or for this internship, right? Am I eligible for this financial aid?
So you're not going to become a surgeon by not going to a four-year college,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are a lot of other fields where there can be alternative paths.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was the overachiever that got every degree possible until I ran out of degrees. And my sister, who has only a bachelor's degree, makes more money than I make. I'm able to live on my salary, but just saying degrees don't equal income, don't equal success.
Yeah, and industries
Yeah.
have different standards
Yes.
because you're going to get paid differently if you're in architecture
Mm-hmm.
versus if you're in academia versus if
Yeah.
you're in the medical field, because
Yes.
certain fields are determined to be more important to capitalism.
Weak Money asked, did I make a mistake changing my studies halfway through? No.
First of all, what you major in doesn't necessarily have to become your career.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, your career doesn't have to encompass all of your passions and interests. There is no such thing as a dream job, and sometimes it is probably better for your mental health to choose a career path that doesn't intersect with your personal passions, because then you can distance yourself from your work. So
Lauren realizing and verbalizing the thing that took me like 30 years to arrive at. For the longest time, I felt like the way to feel validated as an artist is to make money out of it. Like monetizing things is how you know you made it. Even thinking about like things like if anything changes at my job and it is this thing that I love that is such a big part of me, how am I going to feel if I end up being like downsized, or if something changes and it is not profitable anymore? I agree 100% with you, Lauren. There is no dream job. There are jobs that align with our passions sometimes, but a job is at the end of the day a job, and there's things about jobs that are miserable, and it's healthy to
yeah.
not have the things you love be all mixed up with that.
Oftentimes, when you choose a career path that is quote unquote pre professional, like to be a vet or to be a doctor or whatever, you technically have to go to grad school for that to get a certification. You're paying for 4 years of undergrad anyway. I am thinking about going to law school, but you don't have to major in legal studies to be a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. For my grad program, I wasn't required to have a degree in Spanish. I was just required to complete an application that demonstrated that I was bilingual. I had to take the GRE. Classmates in our cohort that were in their 40s starting out and had already had different careers altogether elsewhere. And one of them had been an engineer in Colombia, and then he moved here to start that program in Hispanic studies. Like Lauren said, for a lot of grad programs, just your GPA and occasionally some prerequisite courses are all you need versus a whole switch of major. Even if you're going into a field that seems entirely different, there's a number of skills that you have already acquired in those courses that are absolutely transferable to what you're going to be doing now. And it is helpful if you've been in the humanities and are going into the sciences. The way of thinking in the humanities that is a lot more open-ended with questions, and you look at different perspectives. And when I trained those colleagues that came from schools that weren't that way, that have only been focusing on the sciences for most of their lives, it is very difficult for them to grasp the concept of discussion or like Socratic, like conversations, etc. I'm astounded at that, and I think, oh wow, it feels like you missed a chunk of college. And they didn't. They got all the degrees they could get, but because they were so insular in their own area, their way of thinking is very much tailored for that area alone.
This is going to be a bit of a full circle moment, but interdisciplinary. I think as someone who works in academia, someone who is in academia, it is a buzzword that has been used so much recently by all kinds of colleges. And a lot of it is advertising, unfortunately. Even the concept of, you have multiple interests and you can combine them has been monetized because interdisciplinary fields, interdisciplinary studies are now so desirable. It's very obvious that, that increases your worth as a member of a capitalist society.
That makes me think of some students I've had who have combined fields that don't seem related at all, and we found ways to make it work. I'm also thinking about the survey class that I teach in May that is for non-majors, the year that the Zika virus was a thing. And I had so many biology students explain like the way that mosquitoes act as vectors from a scientific point of view. And it was the coolest. And I was so glad that they were there because I didn't have the background for it. And it just like it felt like a really good moment to remind both students and I that the class is something that we build together as a group versus me choosing everything and it being my word only.
It's kind of almost an anarchist perspective of
Yeah.
building up an educational system.
Mm-hmm. One of the things in your outline was about my philosophy of education, or it started with my first pedagogy class in grad school, where basically they had first year students just arriving at the program for Spanish or Hispanic studies, for Germanic studies, and Francophone studies. So we had a lot of like TAs fresh out of another job or undergrad coming in and not knowing how to teach. And so that was like the lab class where they taught us how to teach and like all the methods that have come throughout the years. And there were some kooky ones. There were ones where you had to, I think it was called Suggestopedia, and there were like shapes and things that you placed on a table. And instead of speaking, you put like a circle and a pyramid and whoa. But all of that to show is like teaching a language is like an evolving science and it's bound to change. But at the end of that, the method that they advocated for the most was the communicative method. And one of the pillars of that was that you're not above the students, that you're not like the center of attention and the keeper of knowledge, but rather that you're just facilitating, but you have to allow students to express themselves and be part of the conversation, be part of the rhythm, and follow along with them. And I love that. And I bring that into classes that are not language, like second language acquisition courses, because I find that it just works better. And looking back at the classes that I liked, that's what they did. That's what my professors did. The ones that I hated or that I was overwhelmed by was just lecture, 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 do this exam, you're nothing, I'm everything. And that is like what I never want to do. And just the idea of it, yeah, it takes time. And sometimes it's harder to get to know the group and the group's needs and the group's personalities. And I mean, there are cases where you try and you may not succeed in tailoring things as best as you can because there's other factors at play. Like, for example, during a pandemic, teaching over Zoom, it still stands no matter what that you have to listen and not just assume and not come in with, I prepared this. It doesn't go with you guys. Oh, too bad. It's what I'm bringing anyway. That's like, don't do that. Don't do that ever. Listen and like allow people to speak their own truth. There are topics that I'm going to teach that are really complex. And for some students, like maybe they've lived a life that's really sheltered and it's the first time they hear about it. We talk a lot about inequality in my courses and we work with an intersectional model because how can you not? But for a lot of people, that's like news. Whereas for other people, it's so obvious. And so going into it, assuming that no one knows it is insulting for the people for whom that's their daily life. But going in, assuming that everyone knows is also a disservice to the students who are probably lost and thinking intersectional what? Wait, what? And so if somebody's experience resonates with what you're teaching, I love like just pausing whatever I'm saying or showing or what we're doing and listening to that person and allowing people to ask questions. Kind of like move the spotlight from like me to the student that wants to share. There's always someone there, there's always something that can be added.
I'm just curious to learn more about how tenure works, and I know that your experience may be different from other professors' experiences, but it seems like something that students should know about their professors because it's really important to them.
Yes. So this is very interesting and complex because it's a little different for each institution. So just to put it in like the simplest terms that I can think of, there are different levels of professorship. And so you have, it's like a hierarchy, and it's very much tied to prestige, tied to your level of education, but also to income. So the highest levels will earn more. And of course, every university and college has a different salary for professors. So for example, when I was going on the job market, the salaries in California were like twice as much as you could get on the East Coast. But I think it's because the cost of living is higher there than in some of like the states, especially in the South around here. So it kind of scales up and down based on that. When you think about the hierarchy of professors, you start with adjuncts. That's a fancy name for part-time faculty. So this is professor who doesn't need to have a PhD, but generally an adjunct will have a master's degree. Many times adjuncts work multiple jobs because institutions are basically trying to get positions staffed at like the lowest they can pay legally, which them like all of my colleagues and I think the way that adjuncts are treated is pretty much criminal. It's just dehumanizing. Most adjuncts don't even get an office. In some institutions, you might have a shared office for adjuncts and some not. So you'll see adjunct faculty doing office hours in the middle of a hallway, having to bring their own laptop, not having like their own phone number that students can reach. It's a lot of hurdles for the same amount of work and less pay. And so a lot of adjuncts, like we've had adjuncts at my institution who also are high school teachers full time, and they're adjuncting to supplement their income from teaching high school, which again, another thing that I just,
Yeah, I've been reading articles about
yeah.
how like high school teachers Uber on the weekends, and I'm like,
Mhm.
this is ridiculous.
Oh, one of my friends, she's a middle school music teacher and she Ubers and she also has a summer job at a coffee shop.
I've heard of people like donating their blood to make money.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is dystopian.
It is. It is. But people say, oh, professors are getting rich out of tuition. And I will just laugh and laugh and laugh. I agree with you that tuition is too expensive and you shouldn't be paying this much for college. This is ridiculous. However, it is not going to us. And I have colleagues who are really struggling right now. And I'm thinking of those adjunct colleagues. So above that is the lecturer or instructor position, which is a position where you may or may not need a PhD and it's full time. You typically only teach lower level courses. So if you are at an R1 where there's graduate programs, you wouldn't teach the graduate courses. You would only teach undergrad. If it's an only undergrad institution like mine, you would then only teach the introductory courses, and then everything advanced would be by the tenured faculty. In some cases, instructors can be senior instructors, so you have to submit a portfolio to get that sort of promotion, and that ensures that your position is secured for like the foreseeable future. But depending on the economic situation of your institution, it may be terminated. With tenure, faculty do have to have a PhD, and then you have to teach for a number of years and complete a number of requirements as well. You start as assistant professor, and that sounds like part-time, but it isn't. It just means that you're tenure track. And then you switch to associate, which means that you already obtained tenure. So once before you get tenure, you are not allowed to participate in certain faculty committees. There's some decisions that you're not eligible for. It comes with more prestige, but not necessarily a lot more money.
It's frustrating, especially at my university. We students don't often feel heard, which is, I think, something that is true for a lot of four-year colleges, just because the administration is so focused on the admin and the financial needs and donors and stuff that it's
That's the same for us. I feel like the most important thing is to sweeten up the pot for donors. It's frustrating because we understand we need the funding, but if the funding comes at the expense of dismantling the institution and taking away the things that were benefiting it, then what are we doing? It happens outside of school as well. The feeling of being a cog in some inscrutable machine is how I felt as a fully employed adult over the last several years of my life, until I had to reevaluate how much time and energy I was putting into work and how much of my life I was giving to work versus my own personal life, because I was burning out. And I think going back to our earlier conversations on grades and overachievement, you do have to set some boundaries. If you give everything, capitalism is going to take it, and it's not going to care that you were a good person or that you had good intentions. Make sure that you take care of yourself and that you put yourself first.
this speaks to a broader issue with universities about communication with their student body, but
Mhm.
also sensitivity,
Oh gosh, yeah.
especially in regards to social justice, racial inequality, gender inequality, LGBTQ rights,
Yeah.
the whole spectrum of issues. It's like you want actionable change, but because the board and the president have sort of elevated themselves away from the student body, it feels like there's no way to communicate to them.
It's interesting that our institutions are so different and yet we grapple with some of the same frustrations. I'm really sorry for all the students who feel unseen and unheard. And I don't know that this makes any difference as faculty. Very often also feel unseen and unheard. And I think this is an issue like that many institutions need to address or change. If it's going to be that way, like at least just tell us, like don't give us this fake idea of you're part of the process when we're really not.
Yeah, transparency.
Yeah.
When Asian hate crimes were beginning to start and be documented by the media, our school decided to send out a very kind email. Asian students, you are noticed, comma, appreciated, comma, etc., period. And I just wonder who okayed that message? Who looked at that and said, that is a sensitive, genuine email to send to our student body. Yeah. There is no transparency, so I have no idea what happened. Maybe they were actually well-intentioned. I have no idea, because oftentimes the higher up you go, it's increasingly cis, straight, and white.
Same. And it's been very frustrating with some situations that have happened. Like, I'm really sorry that you went through that, by the way. The dean of students, white, cis, straight woman, she has this strategy where she will send emails at the end of the day on a Friday, sort of like, when people are like off work and can't are not in like the mental space to go back and hold it accountable. In a lot of cases, it's performative or sort of like, in passing, not very, very genuine. The ignorance, like I know that it's always malicious, but it's very often so ignorant. And it just makes you think, what is keeping you from talking to members of the community that you are addressing?
And I think that sometimes makes it even worse, because you want to educate the people who are in charge of your learning environment. But if they don't even realize and they're not open to learning, it's like a dead end. When the Europeans decided to colonize everywhere, of course they decided to destroy all these languages. And so of course that's why there's only 2 semesters worth of like Quechua or any other indigenous language. So that's your fault. And then to go further and say, oh, there weren't enough people that registered for this 2-semester course, so we're going to cancel it, is a decision that is so misinformed, because it is a lack of genuine consideration to what taking that course might mean for people. When you cancel those courses, you're really invalidating, these people's experience. That is an example not only of ignorance, but also because of like money, capitalism.
Yeah, just the metric of, there's not enough people enrolled, so economically it doesn't make sense. We're paying the professor this much money, so for the money that we're giving them, we should be teaching more students, is the reasoning behind that.
Intersectionality for course curricula has been something that definitely needs to be expanded upon, or at least publicized.
It tends to be the humanities that get the axe so quickly. It's an implicit bias. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I think if it's anything that feels vaguely ethnic, the people making those choices on this will be canceled, it just seems like an easier, like, oh yeah, of course, who would want to take that? That's too weird. And like anytime somebody uses the word weird or says that nobody wants to take it, it just makes me angry, because it's just that it's ethno-pessimism. I've actually thought about this, like just coming in with the idea of, these cultures have had struggles, they're always going to be bad, it's never going to get better. That ethno-pessimism is so present in academia. I think our generations are aware that that's not the truth, and that dooming it from the start is on us, right? And we can change that.
It's so tragic that there are so many professors who are so interested in these topics and they want to teach it, and administration and bureaucracy gets in the way.
They always go about numbers and enrollment, and they will bring you bar graphs and all of that, and they miss the point. They miss the point altogether. If I got to make my own university, I would have very small classes and there would be no grades. This is like one thing that people sometimes are like, no grades. I hate grades. I would love not to assign grades. I feel like the best learning comes not from trying to ace an exam, but from just the conversations that you have in that class and the process that happens over the course of several months, discussing these topics and engaging with them and looking at them in different ways. But it would be challenging, I guess, to produce credentials for employment if there is no grade. But yeah, maybe this school project will happen someday just for the sake of learning.
This episode is brought to you by Grayspace. Grayspace, it sure as hell ain't capitalism.
Well, that is a massive compliment and I love it. Thank you. And tuition will be paid in the form of engagement and just learning to love learning. I'm not a super big fan of exams unless it's a thing where, for example, with language acquisition, you have to have a vocabulary base or an understanding of rules before you can move on to the next step. And even then, like there's different ways of assessing. And exam taking is not for everyone. I just don't think that's the one and only or the end all be all. One thing that I forgot to mention with my teaching philosophy was encouraging students to develop a love of learning for life. And I think that's one of the things with me that I just love learning new things. And I will like pick up new hobbies just because I get excited and pumped and like, woof, like energized by learning something new and remembering that age is not a constraint. Like I grew up with people telling me, oh, if you don't start an instrument by this age, you'll never learn, or you're never going to be fluent in a language if you don't start by this age. And I like to believe that I proved them wrong because I taught myself English and learned it as a teen rather than as a small child. And I think my English it has served me pretty well. Is it perfect? I don't know, maybe not, but it is great. And the level that I have, they told me I would never accomplish. And I play guitar and I'm teaching myself how to produce music. And all of my art stuff is self-taught and it's done really at, in my 30s. And I feel that you can do it no matter what. So I want to like be able to continue following those passions and reminding my students you can still do this and look at these cool things that I'm doing in class right now and teaching you because I learned this recently.
I have a few rapid fire questions to ask you.
All right. Okay.
So the first one is, if you could instruct any college course, what would it be and what would it be called?
One that I haven't done that I would love to do would be an art analysis course, Hispanic art, so both Spain and Latin America and US Latinx art in one semester, and just look at the cultural, political layers of those artworks in addition to the technical.
Cool. My second question is, you recently shared with us a picture of your office, and it had lots of really cute things in it. What is your favorite trinket that you have in your office?
This action figure of Spider-Gwen. I think I like it because it reminds me of all the students that I've been able to reach through like my nerdiness. It makes me happy that I can express that and have it like out at my job because it's a big part of me and I don't have to like be all stuffy and like blazers all the time. Even though I like a good blazer, I can still be me doing my job.
Well, thank you so much for coming on iNtErDiSciPliNaRy Pod. Plug yourself. Where can we find you?
Okay, so I go by Spicy Peppy Grace on Twitch. You can find me on Twitter as Spicy Peppy, and then on Instagram as Spicy Peppy Games. So please follow me if you don't already. And thank you, Lauren. This was really fun. And again, I just feel so excited and honored that you invited me to be here today. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
As for myself, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at LoreFiBeats. And you will find this episode of AD Pod on YouTube soon. It will be highlighted as a VOD here on Twitch. The YouTube version will be edited. And then the audio version of said YouTube video will be coming out on Google, Apple, and Spotify podcasts at the beginning of the academic semester.
Ooh, thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grace. I will be back sometime next week interviewing another special guest. Hee hee hee.
Looking forward to watching that one.
And I will see you guys soon.